Rumors suggested that the then Meghan Markle likely spent time with Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein before she even met Prince Harry.
Nasty, and says he feels sorry for Prince Harry because his wife is a lot to deal with.
Sometimes the most devastating attacks come wrapped in laughter. When Colin Jost stepped up to the Weekend Update desk on Saturday Night Live, nobody expected him to deliver what would become the most talked about royal roast in television history. With that trademark smirk spreading across his face, he locked eyes with millions of viewers and casually dropped a bombshell that would send shockwaves through Montecito and beyond. Apparently, one of the terms in Trump's new UK trade deal is that we send Meghan Markle back, but only if she deletes her entire Instagram again. The studio audience erupted, social media exploded, and somewhere in her carefully curated California mansion, Meghan Markle reportedly came dangerously close to hurling her wine glass straight through her floor-to-ceiling windows. But this wasn't just another celebrity roast or political jab. This was something far more calculated, far more dangerous to everything Meghan had spent years building. You see, Colin's joke wasn't really about Instagram or trade deals. It was about authenticity. It was about the growing suspicion that the woman who presented herself as a victim of royal racism and media manipulation might actually be the most skilled manipulator of all. And the timing? Well, that's where this story gets really interesting. Just 72 hours before Colin delivered that punchline, something extraordinary happened in the darkest corners of the internet. Photos began circulating, not blurry paparazzi shots or doctored tabloid images, but crystal clear, high-resolution photographs that told a very different story about Meghan's pre-royal life than the one she'd been selling to the world. Picture this, a gleaming yacht deck somewhere in the Mediterranean, champagne glasses catching the golden hour light, and a carefully curated circle of extremely wealthy, extremely powerful men. At the center of it all, a woman who looked remarkably like Meghan Markle, but not the Meghan we came to know as the struggling actress or the humanitarian duchess. This was Meghan in designer swimwear, dripping in luxury, surrounded by the kind of international elite that most people only read about in Forbes. The internet detectives went to work immediately. They analyzed everything from the curve of her smile to the distinctive bracelets on her wrists. They cross-referenced timestamps, studied shadows, and compared facial features with the precision of forensic scientists. And here's what made their findings so explosive. This wasn't some college spring break photo from 2004. The metadata, the fashion, the technology visible in the background all pointed to a much more recent time frame, right around the period when Meghan was supposedly building her clean, conscious lifestyle brand and preaching about female empowerment and social justice. But wait, it gets better. Because these photos didn't exist in isolation, they were part of a much larger collection, a digital breadcrumb trail that painted a picture of a woman who had been networking at the highest levels of international society long before she ever met Prince Harry. We're talking about exclusive yacht parties, private jets, and intimate gatherings with billionaires, tech moguls, and political power brokers from around the globe. Now, here's where Colin Jost's joke becomes absolutely brilliant. He didn't just mock Meghan's Instagram habits or her relationship with social media. He exposed the fundamental contradiction at the heart of her entire public persona. Because if Meghan really was living this ultra-glamorous, ultra-connected lifestyle while simultaneously crafting her image as the relatable, struggling actress who just happened to catch a prince's eye, then everything about her fairy tale romance becomes questionable. Think about it. The official story has always been that Meghan and Harry met through a mutual friend, fell in love over private dinners, and built a genuine connection away from the spotlight. It's been marketed as an organic love story, a modern fairy tale where the prince rescued the commoner from her ordinary life. But what if the commoner was never really a commoner at all? What if she was already moving in circles that intersected with royalty, wealth, and power long before that famous blind date? The photos suggest something that royal biographers have been whispering about for years, that Meghan's path to Prince Harry was far more strategic and calculated than anyone wanted to admit. These weren't chance encounters or coincidental meetings. This was high-level networking, the kind that happens at exclusive events where guest lists are more closely guarded than state secrets. And Colin's joke? It landed like a precision strike because it acknowledged what everyone was thinking, but nobody was brave enough to say out loud. That maybe, just maybe, Meghan Markle's greatest performance wasn't on Suits or at royal engagements, but in convincing the world that she was something she never actually was. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Within hours of the SNL episode airing, the photos were trending across every major social media platform. TikTok users were creating detailed video analyses, breaking down everything from Meghan's body language to the backgrounds of the men she was photographed with. Twitter became a battleground of theories, evidence, and heated debates about what it all meant. But here's what made this different from every other Meghan Markle controversy: the silence. For someone who had built her post-royal career on speaking her truth, sharing her story, and controlling her narrative, Meghan's response to these photos was deafening in its absence. No denials, no legal threats, no carefully worded statements from her representatives. Just complete, total silence. And that silence spoke volumes, because if you've spent years training the public to expect your immediate response to every criticism, every rumor, every perceived slight, then suddenly going quiet sends a very clear message. It suggests that maybe, for the first time, Meghan Markle found herself in a situation where the truth was more damaging than any lie her critics could invent. The internet, of course, had thoughts about this. Conspiracy theories flourished. Deep dive investigations multiplied. Amateur sleuths began connecting dots between the yacht photos and other aspects of Meghan's pre-royal life that had always seemed slightly too perfect, too convenient, too strategically advantageous to be entirely coincidental. They started examining her previous relationships, her career trajectory, her sudden appearances at high-profile events and charity galas. They looked at how she'd managed to transition from a cable TV supporting actress to the guest lists of the most exclusive events in London, New York, and Toronto. They questioned how someone with her relatively modest background had developed such sophisticated media management skills and such an extensive network of influential contacts. What they found was a pattern, a carefully constructed path that led from yacht parties to charity events to fashion shows to, ultimately, a blind date with a prince. It wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It was a masterclass in social climbing, executed with the precision of a military operation and the patience of a chess grandmaster. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating. Because while the internet was busy dissecting Meghan's past, something else was happening behind the scenes. Sources close to the Sussex camp began leaking stories about Meghan's reaction to the viral photos and Colin's joke. And these weren't the usual carefully managed leaks designed to generate sympathy or control narrative. These were raw, unfiltered glimpses into a woman who had finally lost control of her own story. According to multiple insiders, Meghan's response was nothing short of volcanic. She reportedly spent hours on the phone with her legal team, her PR representatives, and her media contacts, desperately trying to find a way to contain the damage. But for perhaps the first time in her adult life, Meghan discovered that there are some stories that can't be spun, some truths that can't be rewritten, and some images that can't be deleted. The yacht photos weren't just embarrassing personal snapshots. They were evidence of a fundamental deception that undermined everything Meghan had built since marrying into the royal family. They contradicted her carefully crafted image as the outsider who had to learn royal protocol, the American who was overwhelmed by British traditions, the commoner who was shocked by the level of scrutiny that came with royal life. Because if you're already comfortable on yachts with billionaires, if you're already accustomed to high-level networking and media attention, if you're already moving in circles where privacy is a luxury and image management is a survival skill, then your entire victim narrative becomes suspect. And that's exactly what started happening in the days following Colin's joke. The sympathy that had carried Meghan through her royal exit, her Oprah interview, and her subsequent media ventures began to evaporate. People started asking uncomfortable questions. If Meghan was already living a lifestyle of extreme privilege and luxury, then what exactly was she escaping from? If she was already skilled at manipulating media coverage and public perception, then how much of her royal victim story was genuine and how much was performance? These questions weren't coming from tabloid journalists or royal correspondents anymore. They were coming from ordinary people who had supported Meghan, defended her against criticism, and believed in her version of events. And when your supporters start questioning your credibility, that's when you know you're in real trouble. The Hollywood reaction was swift and brutal. In an industry where image is everything and reputation is currency, Meghan's stock began plummeting faster than a tech startup during a market crash. Projects that had been greenlit suddenly faced unexpected delays. Brand partnerships that had seemed certain began encountering mysterious legal complications. Invitations to high-profile events started getting lost in the mail. Because here's what people outside the entertainment industry don't understand: Hollywood might be built on fantasy, but it's run by business people who understand reality. And the reality is that Meghan Markle had become radioactive. Not because of the yacht photos themselves, but because of what they represented: uncontrollable risk. In an industry where every scandal can be spun, every controversy can be managed, and every mistake can be rebranded as growth, Meghan had committed the ultimate sin. She had lost control of her own narrative. And once that happens, you become unemployable, unmarketable, and ultimately, irrelevant. The irony wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. The woman who had built her entire post-royal career on the premise that she was the victim of media manipulation and image distortion had actually been the one manipulating images and distorting reality all along. The photos didn't just expose her past. They exposed her methods, her strategies, and her willingness to completely reinvent herself depending on what was most advantageous at any given moment. But perhaps the most devastating aspect of the entire scandal wasn't the photos themselves or even the public reaction. It was the impact on Harry. Sources close to the couple began reporting that the prince, who had given up everything for love, was starting to question whether that love had been based on truth or performance. Harry, who had famously said he fell in love with Meghan the moment he met her, was now confronting the possibility that the woman he met might not have been the real Meghan at all. That perhaps he had fallen in love with a carefully constructed character, a role that Meghan had been perfecting for years before she ever auditioned for the part of his wife. The psychological impact of this realization cannot be overstated. Harry had already sacrificed his relationship with his family, his military career, his royal duties, and his homeland for this woman. The idea that it might all have been based on a deception was reportedly devastating to his mental health and his sense of identity. This is where Colin Jost's joke transcended comedy and became cultural commentary, because what he had done, intentionally or not, was expose the fundamental dishonesty at the heart of one of the most famous love stories of the 21st century. He had taken a fairy tale and revealed it to be a business transaction, a romance, and shown it to be a strategic alliance. The aftermath continues to unfold in ways that even the most cynical observers couldn't have predicted. The photos keep circulating, the questions keep multiplying, and the silence from Montecito keeps growing more deafening. Each day that passes without a response from Meghan only adds more weight to the speculation and more credibility to the alternative narrative that's emerging. And what is that narrative? It's the story of a woman who understood long before she met Prince Harry that authenticity is less important than the appearance of authenticity. That in our social media age, image isn't just part of reality. It can completely replace reality if you're skilled enough at the game. Meghan Markle didn't just climb the social ladder. She perfected the art of making that climb look effortless, natural, and inevitable. She didn't just network with powerful people. She made those connections seem like genuine friendships based on shared values and mutual respect. She didn't just reinvent herself. She made each reinvention seem like a natural evolution, a growth process that anyone could relate to and admire. The yacht photos shattered all of that. They provided visual evidence of a woman who was always more calculating, more connected, and more strategic than she ever admitted. They showed someone who wasn't the victim of circumstance but the architect of her own extraordinary destiny. And Colin Jost, with one perfectly timed joke, had opened the floodgates for all of this truth to come pouring out. He hadn't just made people laugh. He had made them think, question, and ultimately, see through the illusion that had been so carefully constructed over so many years. The real question now isn't whether Meghan will recover from this scandal. It's whether she can survive the loss of her most powerful weapon, the ability to control how her story is told. Because once that's gone, once people start seeing through the performance, there's no amount of PR spin or legal maneuvering that can put the genie back in the bottle. Colin Jost's joke will be remembered as the moment when Meghan Markle's carefully crafted image finally cracked beyond repair. And sometimes, that's all it takes. One joke, one photo, one moment of truth to bring down an empire built on lies. The internet never forgets, and neither will the world.